Hello, my name is Dr. Clay Dibrell. I'm a professor of management and entrepreneurship here at the University of Mississippi, and I'm also the co-director for the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. As part of my position, I get a chance to talk to some really cool people about entrepreneurship. And then today, we're very fortunate I'll be speaking with Jeffrey Little, who is a principal account executive, and it's a big time selling machine with the FNC Core Logic. And it's just really exciting for us to spend some time with him. He graduated in 2004 from the University of Mississippi. As you will see here, he's got a lot of energy, and there's also a lot of great opportunities. So if you can pay attention long enough, you're going to learn a lot of good things, and also really try to focus on some things such as they're looking to hire people, FNC Core Logic. So, all right, enjoy the interview, and I will see you at the end. Thank you. Welcome. I'm very pleased today to be joined by Jeffrey Little, who has a wonderful story about selling and also growing up here in Oxford and creating an entrepreneurial mindset. And so as you listen to Jeffrey here, I want you to really start to think about how you envisioning your own career going forward and what that could look like. And so to give a little bit more formal introduction to Jeffrey, he graduated from Ole Miss Business School back in 2004. So howdy toddy, Jeffrey, for that. Thank you very much for coming back. And also he has been working here in town with FNC and Core Logic since 2007. Now he is graduated again, been promoted multiple times, but he is now a principal with Core Logic and also an account executive. So he's pretty high up in the chain. And so we're very fortunate to have Jeffrey with us today. And Jeffrey, thank you so much for taking your time to speak with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And so Jeffrey, you have we've talked off camera a little bit here about some of the cool experiences that you had. Can you give us a bit more about the background and your background and how you've come to this point, basically?
Sure. And I want to talk about really three things over the course of this call. I want to talk a little bit about a legacy story about a business called FNC that originated here in Oxford, was actually incubated by the university, took years and years to land the first customer. But ultimately, this thing was a tremendous success story that resulted in a sale for $400 million to a company called Core Logic that's based out of Irvine, California. So I want to talk a little bit about FNC, a private company. I'll talk a little bit about Core Logic, which is a publicly traded company, and then I'll weave in a little bit of personal throughout the story as well.
Excellent. Very good. So talk to us, because I know Bill Rayburn keeps popping up, especially here in town. Tell us a little bit how Bill has been involved with you and in your life and how he's helped you.
Absolutely. So I'll start with just a little story. I think for anybody in the entrepreneurship class, I think there's a couple of important things to think about. Number one is the mindset. Okay. And, when you're in school and you don't have the world experience, sometimes you have, preconceived notions about how things work, and then you get out in the world and you realize they're a little bit different. So I really wanted to just start with a quick little, really simple story around sort of how I got my start, and ultimately what helped me land my first couple of jobs, really without ever showing a resume. So I started, this is going to sound so silly, y'all, but I started cutting grass here in town when I was 13 years old. And as most of you know, around the 2003 timeframe, we had this gentleman, last name Manning, that came through Oxford and caused quite a stir, with our all of all activity around campus, football and growth in the residential real estate space and all this sort of thing. And so as I was in college at the time, the little business that I had grew to, as the need and demand around, services around cutting grass and this sort of thing, as that grew, I had an opportunity to have a business that expanded quite a bit, where I was hiring fraternity brothers and, working with a group to essentially take on as much business as possible. And I would schedule my classes at Ole Miss around all of that activity. And, so it was like work first because it was cash money. And then there was this other thing called class that had to also become part of that. I also had this mindset at the time that, there was going to be a point where I had to go get a real job. And so as soon as I came out of school, I had been interviewing with a firm out of Memphis, a financial services firm out of Memphis, Tennessee, And I was convinced that I needed to go get, my Series 7 license, and I wanted to sell securities for a living. Fast forward just a little bit, when you get into that business, the financial services business early, what you don't realize is step number one is to call all of your friends and family and anybody that you've ever known. And step one is to sell them life insurance, which nobody told me that was where it was all going to start. So, early on, my shtick was, I'm 23 years old, and I'm trying to convince people that I know more about their financial position than they do, and I can help them in that way. And one of my little shticks in that was, please give me some referrals. If you could, if you don't want to do business, that's fine. But I'd love a couple names because I got to meet my meeting quota, for the week. And this name kept coming up throughout this time. The name was, you need to call Bill Rayburn. Have you heard of FNC? He's got 250 employees. You need to call him. You need to figure him out. So again, for the group, this is before cell phones were really a big thing. This is even before the iPhone was even released. We did have iPods and this sort of thing at the time, but the cell phone was like, it was Nokia. It was Snake. It was very different. And so I managed to get Bill Rayburn's cell phone number, and I just started to call him relentlessly. And so, for the better part of probably 9 or 10 months, during my cold call sessions, I would call Bill, and he would never answer. And that's fine. He was a busy man. Well, one particular Friday afternoon, this is still a point in my career when I thought Friday afternoon at 3 p.m. was a good time to cold call. And I remember this vividly. He picks up the phone and he goes, this is Bill Rayburn. And he goes, who are you and what do you want? Because I had been wearing his cell phone out. Fast forward a little bit. He said, look, Jeffrey, I'm on the road 250 days a year. I don't have much time for you, but I do come into the office early. And if you want to come see me, he said, I'll be in town next week. I come in at 3 a.m. Why don't you come see me at 4? And I thought, what a nut job. But yeah, I'll come at 4. Yeah, that sounds great. So I put on my tie and I showed up to see him at 4 a.m. And, Bill in his entrepreneurial way, we just talked. We talked about life and what was motivating me and all these sorts of things. And honestly, it was what he offered me was a lot of encouragement. And he also offered this spark. I saw something in him that I had not seen in anyone in my previous life before that point. I just thought in my mind, gosh, man, if I could pluck a little bit of what he has, that would be a great start to my career. And so I really want to start with this whole idea. As you all get out into your careers and you begin to either take your own idea to the next level, or you look to get involved with somebody that's got a great idea and you want to help them execute on it. It is okay to find somebody that has been successful and to basically beg them for an opportunity, or to beg them to just spend time with you, to teach you, tell you some of the war stories, some of the ups and downs and the emotional saga that is entrepreneurship and trying to build a company. And so Bill gave me this cool opportunity, to try to sell he and his firm, some sort of financial something. By the way, for those of you that don't know, he's got his PhD in finance, and there was nothing, absolutely nothing that I could do to help this man, but he was simply giving me an opportunity. So fast forward, I'm coming in for the close. We've been working on a plan for him and the FNC company to sell them securities and health insurance and all these sorts of things. And we've been, working on this stuff for like another 10 months. And I come to the closing meeting and I think I'm about to get the first big paycheck of my official career. And he says, hey, Jeffrey, I'm not buying anything today. This has been an interview. I want you to come work for me. And, me in my own really naive way, I was like, well, what do y'all do? Right. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. Asking the right question. And he proceeded to talk about FNC and what they were working on. And, it was a no-brainer for them, and the rest was history. So really neat opportunity just to sort of indirectly be in the right place at the right time and find a leader that was willing to invest a significant amount of time and energy into me, into my career, into my, my family, to help me learn how to participate in this industry.
And Jeffrey, following up on that question, could you talk us a little bit through, because I know that selling is really, some people really perceive as putting yourself out there to be rejected or to be accepted. It's a validation of you versus the product. Because some people may have gotten angry. For instance, the bill took up 10 months of their life to work on this particular project. So talk to me a little bit about that and how you get over that and how you've been able to do so well.
Absolutely. One of the first things that Bill shared with me when I started here was the sales cycle. So he set this expectation. He said, look, it's going to take you 2 years before you get your first deal. And I was coming, so I'm in the enterprise software business. For those of you that may or may not know what F&C was, it's essentially enterprise software. So think about companies like Oracle or Salesforce, companies that you may have heard of before that are in this space. And so, getting into this business, the first thing he did was say, look, this is going to take, a long time for you to get to a sale, and you're going to have to hammer the phones, and you're going to have to ask lots of questions. And most importantly, you're going to have to know their business better than they do. And unless you know it and you can go in there with confidence, his term is they're going to cut you at the knees. And so a lot of learning is on the fly, right? You got to get your feet wet. You got to jump in. I mean, I went up to Mount Laurel, New Jersey about 30 days in to give my first pitch to who at the time was a top 10 lender. And I was so nervous. I had a pitch book, a PowerPoint presentation printed. And I literally sat there and I read through one line at a time and I asked no questions. So, it was just a pretty good debacle, but it was a great, learning experience just to get out there, put myself out there and sort of see how it goes.
And I was going to say one thing I liked what you said there too was the fact that the confidence comes from the knowledge of knowing your customer before you even go see your customer. Can you talk a little about how important that research is and how you do it?
That's a great question, Clay. And, I think one of the things that we used to talk about all the time was what we called it a research agenda. Okay, whatever that means. But the idea was, and of course, in this age of social media, there's so much information available about people. I mean, you can get down to, like what charities are they involved in and what are their pets' names and what are their interests and all these other sorts of things. But, it's as you think about the network and your network in college versus your professional network. If you can find common bonds between you and others, things that are similar, interests that are similar, things that you may have some interest in, or maybe you do a little homework to study on before you go to have that first conversation. It's not that you show up and you go, hey, Clay, it's nice to meet you. I know your dog's name is Toby, and, you start carrying on about all the stuff, but it helps bring your confidence that like you have some context around who this is and what their role is and what they've done in their prior lives. And then you got to know the company. You got to be able to read the financial reports and this sort of thing, especially for the publicly traded companies that put this information out there. Like you've got to know what their strategic focus is and the things that they're telling the marketplace they're trying to accomplish.
Excellent. And a little bit further down that road, how did Ole Miss help you in terms of, because obviously you have great social skills, and I know you grew up here in Oxford, but just tell us about how Ole Miss helped.
Ole Miss is it's a fantastic university. There is, from an educational perspective, it is an elite school. There's also this really cool thing about Ole Miss that's just, there's just this, it feels like a good old boy network. And, that Ole Miss is a place for social people. It's a place where you can, rub shoulders with peers from all over the country. There's a lot of folks coming in from Texas where there's a lot of business. We got folks coming in from Southern California. We got folks coming in from the Northeast. And when you build these relationships, when you're in school, you really never know. Rest assured in this group, no, you can't possibly know what you're going to do, 3, 4, 5 years from now. At some level, you sort of get into an industry and then you begin to learn and gain knowledge in that industry. And then you look up and you'll find that, you have friends and acquaintances and all sorts of other folks that you knew from school or somebody that knows somebody that you know. And, these things become incredibly powerful when you're simply trying to get an introduction, just an opportunity to have a conversation.
And to that point, could you elaborate a little bit more? Because I think you've alluded to it about networking. So let's say I'm a brand new customer, or you're looking to network with a new customer who you have not met yet. What is your process?
That's a great question. The first thing I'll do is I'll check something like LinkedIn. We've got a pretty powerful version of LinkedIn that gets you a little bit of sort of the nitty gritty of the detail. And, you want to know as much about who they are and where they've been. And a lot of times you'll be able to find, commonalities between either folks that from a previous world that they've worked with, or, you can find some form of relationship through someone that you knew at the university or through some program at the university. It's just amazing really how small, we always joke about how small and incestuous the mortgage business is. And, when you think about it, I mean, the biggest business in the world is healthcare, right? And number two is mortgage. And the secondary market for mortgage, which probably, everybody doesn't know all about yet, but it is just a huge and tremendous business, because at the end of the day, the biggest financial decision most people make in their lives is a decision of whether or not to purchase a home.
Excellent. And I was going to say, and so moving that forward now, so you've been with FNC since 2007, January 1st, 2007. You have seen this company grow. I think we talked about it earlier, from about 25 maybe million to over 250 million in sales and even greater. Walk us through this growth pattern, because obviously you're selling and you're doing a good job because you're still there and you're moving up in the company. But talk us through how it's working for a private equity firm at the time, because eventually CoreLogic comes in and buys it, who's a publicly traded company. But just walk us through that arc, please.
That's right. So, and that's a great question. And it's, the CoreLogic journey has been a really exciting one. So, for a long time, we sort of had this underdog approach here at FNC. We were these, folks from down here in Mississippi, and we were going out and competing with, some of these big financial firms, CoreLogic being one of those, most of them based out in Southern California. So we actually had a little office out there in Costa Mesa, California, which, as we used to say, that's just right by Irvine, California. The rent's a little bit cheaper there, but we were out, we could get out there and tell the story. And I think just the opportunity to go from a privately held company where the philosophy is, you don't ask for permission, you ask for forgiveness, right? The idea is you got to get out there and make it happen, and then you move into an environment that's a little more structured. Being in a publicly traded company, there are more controls in place, and you sort of have to learn how to play a new game. But one of the really neat things about CoreLogic, and this is just my own little perspective on this, one of the neat things we did at FNC was really the technology. So our technology, it is the marketplace's connectivity. So how lenders connect to all the providers, appraisal providers, title providers, providers of flood, all the things that they've got to do to get that mortgage done. We are the technology hub that connects all of that stuff together. Okay. So the business model here was a very brilliant one. It was way ahead of its time. It actually copied Michael Bloomberg. If y'all remember the former mayor, Michael Bloomberg, who financed his own presidential campaign, he did the same thing at Wall Street by standardizing corporate and municipal bond data. And so we took that premise, and our objective was to standardize residential real estate data. And so it ultimately built out this really fantastic network where, when we were able to merge with CoreLogic, they had, really the marketplace's best products and the marketplace's best data. And so we've been able to incorporate those products and that data into our really unique infrastructure, so that we can essentially, I describe, the New York street vendor. I got sunglasses and watches. What do you want? And, how do you distribute that across the country instead of just in New York? Well, FNC, the infrastructure we had in place, is the distribution mechanism for all the things that CoreLogic has to offer. So it became very exciting. And I mean, here we are still in Oxford, Mississippi, doing cutting edge financial technology, really trying to revolutionize an industry and change the way this industry works, which is really a monumental task that takes a lot of people pulling in the same direction.
And kind of falling back on that question, just a little piggyback. So I'm guessing FNC was still very much a startup mindset in the early days when you arrived, because I know students often ask me, what does it feel like to work for, a startup company? So can you walk us through with that feeling? And then, of course, we had the great recession, and how that affected, because, that was one of my first years here. at Ole Miss. And I remember even at the campus at the business school, we all thought, oh my gosh, is FNC going to go under because of this horrific, everything's just frozen in the real estate market. So if you can start with the positive and then talk about how that culture helped pull you through during that difficult period.
Absolutely. And I really want to start with something that is, I'm doing a lot of talking. Okay. I talk fast and I'm high energy and this sort of thing. And you just have to forgive me for that. One of the things that I really had to have, nailed into my head, I still struggle with it. But this whole idea of selling and enterprise selling and a startup mindset is you've got to ask the right questions. They've got to be open-ended. And we used to have this mantra: if you've got 1 hour with a prospect to talk about how to sell your service, if you can get them to talk for 45 minutes, you've done your job. For those of you that are students, think about the last time you went to the bar and you sat down and had a conversation with somebody. In any conversation, when you are the one doing the talking and somebody else is doing the listening, you think about this. You always walk away and you go, man, I really like that person, because you were able to talk the whole time. So people in business love to talk about what they do, whether that it's sometimes really hard to get them to talk. And you got to learn to sometimes close your mouth and let a whole minute go by, which is painful. It's brutal. But if you'll be quiet long enough and ask the right question, they will talk to you about what's on their mind. And almost inevitably, you will get to what we call the pain. When when they will confess a problem to you and you can feel the pain coming from their inflection, you've got something that you can sell. Because in the software business, the step number one is to identify the problem. Once you've got a problem, if you have a good understanding of the business, we'd come back here and we'd all get in the conference room, and Rayburn would get up on the whiteboard and we would literally sit down and design what we were going to pitch. So in the context of selling, the short answer, can you do that? I mean, the short answer is always yes. And then you got to come back and you got to huddle and you got to understand, like, what are all the moving pieces and parts and how do we put this together to execute on a strategy? Understanding it may take a year or two to bring it to bear.
I love the use of the point of pain, by the way, because that's what I talk about in class and we all talk about in terms of filling out. But also I love your point about letting them talk. It's almost like you think about like a 3-to-1, 4-to-1 ratio, something like that, where it's all about them talking versus you talking about that.
And Clay, that is it's a hard lesson to learn. You just have to sort of fall on your face a few times to kind of figure that out.
Excellent. And kind of moving a little bit toward the closing here. So you've alluded to this a few times. Can you talk to us a little bit more about how to land the big deal? I mean, you talked about the point of pain, you're talking about huddling, you're talking about a good group, but walk us through a little bit, please, sir.
And I want to spend a little bit of time. I had our chief appraiser here at CoreLogic. His name is Sean Telford. He grew up in Utah, and then he spent some time out in Southern California. And then he was convinced by Bill to move his family, he has 4 children, to move his family to Mississippi to join us, because he has a lot of, has and had a lot of experience in the appraisal space. And his statement to me, he and I spent a lot of time on the road together, and it was BRT, and that is build relationships of trust. And it sounds so simple, but it is, I don't care what business it is, all business is a relationship business. And so when you think about how to close the deal, you've got to get to the pain. You've got to get them, if they've got a problem that's costing them $500,000 a month, can you negotiate a swap of solving the problem for $200,000 a month to solve a $500,000 a month problem, right? And these are things that take a lot of work and a lot of time to sort of sit down and figure out. But if you can articulate the value proposition, you can reassure them that you can solve the problem. And then ultimately, when the stakeholders come to the table, typically you want to find a champion. So you want to find somebody in that organization whose problem you can solve. And you want to spend a lot of time one-on-one with them, really before you ever get to the table. We call it the boardroom table that's got all the various people, there to make a decision. So that you can't just show up one day, with a group of 12 and expect to close the deal. You've got to really work. You got to find a person that can help you navigate internal politics and these sorts of things. And ultimately, what you're asking of that person is, hey, I need you to put your career, you got to stick your neck out and put your career on the line for me. And then what we're going to do over here is we're going to execute on what we say. And all it takes, once you start that pattern of promise and execution, it doesn't take long before, the mindset changes and these folks start to really begin to trust you. And then you have opportunities to, start a new vertical, go to a whole new place, develop new tools that are outside of the scope of what you're currently doing. And that's how, for us at F&C, and as we have transitioned into CoreLogic, we have grown revenue tremendously by adding new verticals in space where we had some familiarity, but ultimately, we had great relationships and we had to get close, ask questions, identify pain, and circle back to close the deal.
And following up on that again, so one of the things I love to build relationships of trust, the BRT. That is brilliant. I'm assuming this, but make sure, I don't want to assume something wrong here, that you would start off with something fairly small in terms of building that relation, in terms of promising and executing, or do you try to go straight for the top?
That is a great question. There are people that will go straight for the top, and I applaud that. And if there's a great opportunity to do that, I say seize that opportunity. But there is nothing more beneficial than finding someone on the ground floor at that institution. Once you get to the pain, that person can help you understand at a much deeper level what needs to occur for him or her to be successful, which ultimately will bring you the success and your company the success that you're looking for.
And I also liked how you brought up the fact that you need almost an internal champion advocate to do that. And with that said, though, that internal champion advocate's being paid by the company you're trying to sell something to. So you got to make sure, or they need to make sure that it's going to be a benefit for them in their career, because then it's like, why, that skin in the game kind of mindset there.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to add quickly, people make their decisions on whether or not they like you within 1 minute of your first conversation. Within a first minute of that conversation, they have already decided, are they going to give you an opportunity, or are they going to, shun you and move on down the road? And, you got to understand, in these big enterprise, big financial institutions, these people are getting calls all day, every day. So what you got to do is differentiate yourself in the way that you call, in the way that you follow up, even before you've established some form of contact. There has got to be something about you that differentiates. Now, for me, I was taught, you need to be the first one to send that email. I mean, if you've got an important email and you're asking for a meeting from somebody important, send the thing at 4 a.m. Send it at 4:15 a.m. because they don't get that many emails at 4 a.m., right? And so this is like, just how do you separate yourself when you're trying to get to the table? And then, we joke about this all the time, but one of the things, and we play on the sort of Mississippi stigma, but there is only one person of everybody in the entire country that can take one of these right here. I do have this on my desk. This is just a Jeffrey Little stationery. What does that mean? After I've met with somebody, or we hadn't talked about this, but 90 flights a year for the last 12 years until COVID came along. Every time I go out to see somebody, and it's important, all of my meetings prior to now, all those first meetings have been face-to-face. So, hey, I'll be in Southern California in 2 weeks. Can we have coffee for 30 minutes, right? Just an introduction. And I was going to Southern California, whether or not they took the meeting, I'm going to set those up and do that sort of thing. But there's just a great opportunity to really learn through all that.
So in the positive differentiation right there, and you have your stationary, let me ask you, follow up on that. So you've had that first meeting. What do you do to take it to the next meeting? Like, how quickly do you reply back to them saying thank you for their time? Well, what's the closing? Because I know life is all about closing in so many ways, but.
And that's a great question. In an enterprise software deal, really at the end of the day, it's all about responsiveness. Like, they got to know that you're going to take care of them. And so how, for me, it was always like, how can I represent the level of service that they're going to get when they transition, from a prospect into a customer. And for me, that was always just simply responsiveness. So when I start a deal, and I've got somebody that I can tell has a problem that we can solve, it doesn't matter what else I have going on, internal meetings, external stuff, personal, family. When they send me a note, I'm going to respond immediately. And it doesn't have to give the answer. Now, I'm not saying always have the answer, but it says, I'm on it. I got you. I'm on it. And then it's just this idea that they know they can get me via text message, they can get me via email, but I'm at their disposal to help them because opportunities come and go. It's the opportunity is not always right for a deal. And in this business, and really in any business, timing is everything. So it's being at the right place at the right time, which takes a lot of persistence, and letting these people know that you're going to take care of them.
And just to kind of summate what you just said there, Jeffrey, in terms of, so just acknowledging them in the first place when they send that email and you're in a meeting or something, say, I'll let me look into it. I'll get back to you when I know. Just something like that, even though you don't have the answer, but just acknowledging versus waiting 4 or 5 hours and then sending them the answer per se. So yeah, that's a great point.
So email culture has gotten out of control. I mean, it's hard for companies to break away from this culture of everybody sitting behind their desk emailing all day long. So if that's the game that you're playing, where everybody's behind their desk working their pipelines and working their queues and working in email, when you get a question, all they want to know is, did you get my question? Because I'm moving on to the next thing. And if you can hit them back as immediate as when they send it, then all of a sudden they have this mental process where like they've checked you off the list. Okay, I'm good. Let me go focus on what I've got to do. He's taking care of that for me. Instead of them having anxiety or dwelling for like 24, 48 hours, like, I wonder if he got the email. Is he ever going to follow up with me? And these sorts of things. These are simple little things that everybody can do. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to be quick to respond, to let somebody know you got them.
But I will say this, though, it is a real positive differentiator because you can just know in your own life where people have not done that. And I loved your point about, even though it may be subliminal, but this anxiety is there when you have something out there. You get
it
that.
Is. People are busy. People are overworked. In our mortgage business, that actually last year was double the volume. Okay, it's COVID, so everybody's working from home, and the industry doubled the volume of any of the previous 15 years. So like the biggest market in history, and everybody's working from home. Our customers really, it was a really difficult time for them just to simply keep up with what they were doing. So anything we could do to alleviate pain and alleviate manual tasks associated with interacting with us was a big deal in terms of making us relevant.
And kind of, I just want to, if you could, just give us a little insight about how you perceive the future here post-COVID or the COVID transition, however you want to describe it, because many things you talked about is you being there personally with someone so they can see your body language, see that you're engaged, you're an active listener, you're asking the right questions. And granted, Zoom is good. For instance, like we're doing this through Zoom right now, but being in person, can you just, how do you perceive it's going to go forward?
My hope is that we will get back to some semblance of normal. I do want to start with, there is nothing, and I really didn't hammer on this early enough in the discussion. There's nothing more important than FaceTime. My job at the beginning of my career was never to try to get somebody on the telephone. It was always to get them to coffee, get them to lunch, just get them to sit down and have a dialogue. And that meant me going to where they were. And look, y'all, I wouldn't call them and say, hey, can you meet me with me on this day and then book a flight, right? This was me calling saying, I'm going to be there on these days. Which of these times work for you, right? And, this idea that I'm going no matter what. And that was taught to me by Dr. Rayburn at a young age. He said, man, we're going to ride that airplane, right? Now, fast forward to COVID, we joke about this internally, but we've learned to play a new game. I mean, it's become a different game, and you have to learn to be effective over Zoom. And so one of the things that's been really, really important for the growth of our company, we have had tremendous growth here for the last couple of years, and our continued growth is just simply the network. So customers that have worked at one institution and they stuck their neck out and you help them, make a great career advance and these sorts of things. And then they start looking around for another opportunity. And you're talking to somebody over here who has a need, another, prospect that may have a need for your solution. So what do? You work with your customer, you help them better understand how to tell their story. Sometimes it's helping people learn to tell their own story. And then they go through the interview process, they put their neck out, and they land at this new institution, knowing in the back of their mind that the first thing they're going to do is try everything in their power to get you in the door so that they can put their neck out for you again and you can execute and you both are successful in that. It's mutual success. If it's not that, it doesn't work.
Once again, it's that building relationships of trust. And I love that.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so
and it's the little things. No, it's the little things. I held up my note card, but I wasn't clear about that earlier. I have written a handwritten thank you note to every person I've ever been in contact with on the road. It's the first thing I do the morning after I get back is to sit down and just write them a personal note. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to even have context or content about the meeting. It just simply needs to say, thank you. I appreciate your time. It was great to meet you. Thank you for taking time out of your day for me. And that's a lost art. It's something that, your grandmother teaches you when you're young. It's a differentiator. It's a big time differentiator, whether you're an entrepreneur trying to raise money. And for those of you that, do or do not know this yet, this is the game. I mean, it's how do you raise money, to keep things moving, because ultimately, you may not know what the solution will evolve to. It may transition based on the pain and based on the problem that you're actually trying to solve.
So you don't send them an Instagram post or TikTok video or anything like that?
No, we don't do TikTok.
Excellent. Hey, wrapping up here, do you have some closing advice that you would like to give our wonderful students?
I will sort of fall back to where I began. Number one is, if you don't know, there is a tremendous opportunity here in Oxford with CoreLogic. We are actually for sale again, where it's looking like we're about to go back to being a privately held company, which typically means we're going to get a big cash infusion, and we're going to continue to try to execute on our strategy, which is to transform the way that the mortgage process and mortgages are underwritten. Okay, the business has been the same for a really, really long time. And so, just know that, if you are interested in staying in the South and you want to work remotely or work here in Oxford, there are opportunities to do the same things that are done in Silicon Valley, and candidly, to kick their butts right here in your backyard. I missed that on the front end, and I wish that I had been more cognizant to pay attention to that. Number two, find somebody that inspires you. Find somebody that you want to be like, that you can see that they have something to teach. Because what you'll find is most entrepreneurs and most people that have had a lot of success, when they see a little spark in a young person, they are willing to take some time out of their schedule to tell you their story, to share with you their ups and downs, to give you context on what made them successful and mistakes and all these other sorts of things. And so my encouragement is, if you don't have that person in your life yet, and I know fathers and grandfathers are great, but I'm talking about somebody else. I'm talking about somebody that you may not know, that you can really learn from. This is one of the most important things you can do as a person trying to get into business.
That's excellent. Jeffrey, thank you so much. And once again, we'd love for, as you alluded to, we'd love to keep all our graduates in the great state of Mississippi. And we, following Bill Rayburn's vision of making Oxford the next Austin.
There you go.
We would love to have everybody stay here in Oxford also.
Absolutely.
So, but thank you so much for taking your time and great lessons and guidance on selling, networking, and also being a positive differentiator for your company and for others.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for taking time to do that today. And hotty toddy.
Hotty toddy. Hey, for anybody looking for a job, come see us. In all seriousness, I'm on LinkedIn. Come by the building. We'd love to talk to you.
I hope you enjoyed listening to Jeffrey Little. He did a great job, and he had a lot of great things. So remember those things, such as and as well as think about mentoring and networking, but selling. It's always about selling and closing. And I know you're going to do a good job, especially if you get a chance to listen to smart people like Jeffrey. All right. Thank you, and I hope you're having a good day.